and then you know, just go off and do something else, which is what I did, honestly. Otherwise, though, uh, the challenge is to you. Can you beat it? I don't know. Maybe you can. I hope so. Anyway.
Oh my god. I thought you were gonna keep teaching like while you're
Out there.
That's
Just phone it in. All right, so today we're not actually beginning the chapter per se. We're kind of doing the predecessor to the chapter, and then tomorrow we begin chapter 16, section 1. This has to do with the rise of Nazi Germany and Adolf Hitler, and kind of how this stuff comes together. Because one of the things I find is, Hitler's become almost a caricature in a way. We don't really think of him as being a person, as much as being like a force of nature. We tend to talk about Adolf Hitler like we would talk about a hurricane. And I think that kind of does it a bit of a disservice and doesn't really help us learn anything, because then we start to kind of excuse the human complacency in what happened in the Holocaust and the outbreak of World War II. Instead, we also need to look at how Hitler got to where he was as a politician, and all the factors around his life, and the situation in Germany, which gave rise to the totalitarian state that Nazi Germany became. And to understand Hitler, let's first take a look at Germany at the end of World War I. When the Kaiser abdicated the throne and Germany exits the war, a new government is established in Germany that's called the Weimar Republic. And it is a republic that is led by a chancellor. And it has a few different political parties present, representing the various ideologies that represent Germany. For instance, there was a Roman Catholic political party. There was a conservative party, a liberal party. There were all kinds of parties. In fact, there were 8 major political parties operating at any given time within the Weimar Republic. I seem to remember seeing as many as 16 at one point. And consider this. We have a hard enough time in the United States trying to get 2 political parties to work together. How difficult then do you think it would be to get 8 or even 16 to do anything at all? You can see where we're running into some problems. In fact, there was a lot of squabbling that occurred. The only way anyone managed to get anything done was by forming blocs, which were essentially an alliance between political parties. Even so, there was really no one person who was able to sort of unify the groups. There wasn't any strong leadership coming out of Weimar Germany. Add to this the problems that strike Germany. For starters, there were several economic problems plaguing Germany at the time. For starters, it had incurred the exact same devastation that France and, to a lesser extent, England had incurred during World War I. And so their factories were destroyed. Add to this the fact that international depression sets in the 20s and the 30s. And add to that the payments that they're being forced to pay as reparations to the Allies. And you can see that the economy in Germany was pretty much devastated. In addition, we have the onset of hyperinflation. You guys remember, what is inflation? Sorry? When prices increase. That is an observation, that's correct. But why do they increase? Yeah.
Because the worth goes down.
Yeah, the value of the currency goes down. There's too much of it in circulation. And currency, just like any other resource, loses value the more of it there is. So scarcity ends up affecting value. Now, the other thing we have to understand is why is this happening? Why is there so much money in circulation that it's experiencing this hyperinflation? Well, what happens if the government just prints as much money as it wants? Inflation. They have to pay all these debts. They start printing money en masse to try to meet them. We have inflation. Now the difference, by the way, and I kind of skipped over that for a second, so sorry, between hyperinflation and inflation is that inflation is something that occurs naturally over a period of time. Hyperinflation, however, is a great amount of inflation occurring in a small period of time. For example, if you look at the prices of things over the past 100 years, prices have steadily been going up. I don't know if you guys have ever heard your parents or grandparents talk about this. But when I was your age, I paid this much for whatever, And that's such a ubiquitous statement that there are jokes about it, like this one grandfather saying to his kids, well, when I was your age, I could go to the supermarket with a quarter and come back with 3 loaves of bread, 2 dozen eggs, a couple gallons of milk, and nowadays you can't do that because there's too many security cameras. In all truth, things were cheaper. I remember when I was 16, getting my first car and taking it to the gas station to fill it up, and it cost me $15 from empty. That's because gasoline was $1 when I bought it, $1 a gallon. I remember it being as low as 75 cents a gallon, when I was driving. And I remember telling my friends in the high school, if it ever goes up to $4 a gallon, I'm going to buy a motorcycle. I still don't have a motorcycle. But I mean, all kinds of things. How much, and I'm really honestly not sure about this because I go so here frequently, how much is a movie ticket nowadays?
$10. Yeah, like $9.
And if you're not seeing in 3D, correct? Like you're seeing,
Yeah.
it's like what, like 12, 15?
Yeah. I thought it was 19. Matinee is like 5, but that's...
All right. So let's just say this. How much money would you spend if you were going out with your SO? Yeah.
What's that mean?
Significant other. And going on a movie date for the entire trip? Well, let's say you have 2 tickets, so it's $9, it's $18. Unless you're going to the matinee, it's 10. And maybe you get popcorn, maybe you share, and so that's what, $5 for a thing of popcorn, $5 for a drink. So if you're doing it on the cheap, you're looking at $20. Yeah. If you're not quite so frugal, it can go up 30, 40, 50 bucks, right? In 1930, when these films really started kind of coming into their own, people started going to movies a lot, you would see 2 movies, you would get 2 tickets and popcorn and drink for you and your SO for 25 cents. The onset of inflation changes prices. Of course, so does technology, because things when they first come out are more expensive. As technology improves, it's more efficient. Things like that, they can become really cheap. Television is a great example. Regardless, hyperinflation was so bad that something you could buy in the morning for $1 would be $10 by the time you got to school. In order to keep in check, people tried to get rid of money as fast as possible because they knew that it would be losing its value. Instead, they would try to buy a good which had intrinsic value. Intrinsic value means that it has value beyond what we say that it does. Like, for instance, people will often say, well, gold has intrinsic value. And it does to some extent, because people are more trustworthy of gold. It's been a currency far longer than anything else. But things that have a whole lot of intrinsic value are things like bread and milk and eggs and apples and things you can eat. It doesn't lose its value because you can consume it. Or gasoline or tires or any other type of thing that has a physical use. Okay, so people would try to trade things out that had intrinsic value as quickly as possible so that they wouldn't lose the value of having currency on their hand. Because basically, if you waited to go do shopping at the end of the week, your money would be practically worthless. In order to meet this amount of currency, you would have workers being paid daily, and they would have to bring like wheelbarrows or buckets from home in order to take the mountains of bills, because to pay a living wage, you'd have to raise the amount of wages you were paying people. You know, basically, the dollar or in this case, the Deutschmark started losing its value. And so adding to this, you had a great deal of insecurity regarding the economy. People didn't trust the government to handle situations. They didn't really feel secure in the economy, justifiably so. And this, added to these other problems, meant that people were really looking for somebody to come and fix the problems. If nothing else, somebody in a position of authority who can tell people, I understand what you're going through. This is what we're going to try to do to fix it, and to basically assure them that things would be better later. You know, human beings can endure a great amount of hardship if there's hope, that there's a light at the end of the tunnel. And some world leaders at the time who did this very well include folks like Winston Churchill and Franklin Delano Roosevelt. Roosevelt would regularly get on the radio, what was known as fireside chats, and literally address the problems that people were going through. And if nothing else, that made them feel, you know what, the government understands. You know, they know what we're going through, and there's hope that this will be fixed later on. And so the German people were hoping for someone to step into this role. They were looking for someone to be able to kind of fix things. And every time that they had someone who they thought would do it, it ended up not panning out. They hoped that Otto von Bismarck would step in. The thing is, by the 1820s, he's like in his 70s. He's not exactly a young guy. He's not able to really do this. They thought that Hindenburg might be able to do it. But again, he had a lot of political rivals that didn't want him in this position of authority, so he had a lot of contention. So we can understand maybe then why a relatively unknown politician who happens to be extremely charismatic is able to ride this desire into a position of authority where he becomes the center of attention in the country. And that will be Adolf Hitler. Now, Hitler, before he was a politician, you guys know what his desire to be, what his dream job was to be? Yeah, an artist. Specifically of nature. Naturistic. This was a very popular movement in Germany at the time. And he actually applied to the Austrian Arts Academy on several different occasions. And so, he does so, and ends up getting basically rejected. And contrary to popular belief, no, it wasn't a Jew who rejected him and he was getting revenge. It was nothing quite so dramatic as that. Instead, what happened, what caused him to become a politician, was World War I. He, like many young men, joined the army when the war broke out. And generally, they would look for candidates with special skills to fit into different units based upon those skills. For instance, one skill that was highly prized was horsemanship. Now, what's ironic is the horses in World War I were pretty much very quickly ended as a useful military strategy because machine guns make short work of horses. And despite this, horses were still being used as scouts. So he was a scout. And while out scouting, he was attacked by mustard gas, and it blinded him. Now, you guys are aware of this. He wasn't blind, but he did not have very good eyesight. He actually wore glasses. It's just he didn't wear them in public appearances. So this was something that he felt his career as an artist was over. How could he paint when he couldn't see? And so rather distraught, some friends of his encouraged him, go into politics, be an activist, Go out there and speak your mind about what you think the problems are of the society. And so he ended up joining a political party that was the National Socialist German Workers' Party, which is the NASWP. However, in German, the initials are NAZI, hence Nazi Party. And his charisma and his public speaking and his presence quickly allowed him to gain control of the Nazi Party. And when I say charismatic, to this day, Hitler is seen as one of the greatest speech givers to have ever lived. He was able to impassion the German people in such a way that they believed wholeheartedly they were part of this great empire. His anti-Semitic rhetoric was very well received. And because of this, the Nazi Party takes a new turn. In 1923, the Nazi Party attempted to take over the government but failed in what was known as the Beer Hall Uprising. Basically, it was in a bar where there was all these politicians and left up onto a table with a bunch of gunmen that were taking over the government, and quickly overrun by police and arrested and thrown in jail. It was in prison that he wrote this book, Mein Kampf, which means My Struggle. And it basically is going to be the Nazi handbook for really even in modern times. Now, Mein Kampf as a book itself isn't particularly well written, honestly. But what it does do very well is impassion the German people. It becomes a bestseller overnight. And the reason largely has to do with shifting the blame. For instance, why did Germany lose World War I? And the answer, it's the Jews. The Jews had a secret alliance to try to take over the world, and they wanted us to lose. It was their fault that our economy is so bad. Basically blame everything on the Jews. And here's the thing is, looking at that from our own perspective seems a little crazy. But first, let me point out that there's a lot of people who believe a lot of crazy things in the world. Like, are you familiar with burgers? Folks who know since Obama is actually Kenyan. He was born in Kenya, not in the United States. And basically, there's literally no proof on it. But go with it because someone said so, and it just rolls in with their hatred of this particular ideology that's going to go with it. And the same sort of thing happens here. We're very good at shifting the blame to others. We do not like to accept our faults and instead like to find excuses. We know we do it. And we're so good at it, we'll even blame inanimate objects for our faults. I knew a guy playing video games as a kid who, whenever he was losing, was always the controller's fault. It's like, oh, this is a bad controller. It's really it's a controller. It's not that well. I'm not talking about all those crazy bad cats ones that are awful. It's regular controller. And, we do it all the time, like, something like, you fall down, like, stupid rock tripping me. It's like, really? And it's fine. It's human nature.
I trip on my own feet sometimes.
And, we all do it. And we can understand that people are so desperate that, yeah, it's their fault. The Americans did the same thing largely with their U.S. president, Herbert Hoover. To this day, he's got a really bad rap. Really, it's not really his fault. The Great Depression occurred, but people blame him for it because he didn't do anything. Which is kind of ironic when you think about it. It's like, he caused this to happen by not doing anything. But I didn't. So what he does is this document ends up winning him a lot of support. And after he gets out of jail, he starts speaking. His speeches enrapture people. They're able to conjure up this feeling of national pride, the desire to see Germany, the fatherland, rise out of the ashes and become this phoenix story. And he rides that all the way into the chancellor's office, largely because the people were looking for someone to take control. They wanted this, really charismatic figure. And indeed, a lot of the political parties that were kind of squabbling these major blocks look at Hitler and say, this is a guy that we can make into a perfect puppet ruler. Someone who will do exactly what we tell him to do. And we will really be ruling. So they give this position, but he outmaneuvers them. He knows what they think, lets them think it, and when he gains the power, has them knocked out of the way in favor of his own personal supporters and creates his own government. He reorganizes the state into a totalitarian state, which basically is a type of government that is the antithesis, the opposite of democracy. In a democracy, you as a citizen are the most important thing. The government exists for you, to protect you and your interests. That's why the government is here. In a totalitarian state, reverse it. The state matters, you do not. Now that's a very important distinction, because we have rights protecting us from our government. For instance, you could say whatever you want against the government, and guys with big guns are going to come in here and drag you off and never see you again. That absolutely happened in Nazi Germany and other totalitarian states like Japan, like in Italy, like Russia, all these other states at this time period. Furthermore, he repudiates the Treaty of Versailles. The Treaty of Versailles, this thing was a big problem for Germany. He says, we're not doing it. What are you going to do about it? And the thing is, this is calling out the other European states, but Hitler correctly surmises that they're not going to do anything about it, because for one thing, what's the only way of enforcing a treaty? With your own military. They just got rid of all these weapons, the Kellogg-Briand Pact. They didn't have the money to do anything about it, so all they can really do is hurl hurtful words at them, and the guys started to say, too bad, so sad. France actually wanted to do something about it, but they can't, not by themselves. And then Hitler does something that actually the U.S. did as well, engaged in public works, specifically the development of bridges, roads, and things that the society needed. And the state created all these building projects really fast, most importantly, so that there would be workers working. It was hiring these construction folks to do all this sort of stuff, and that meant jobs. Jobs meant money. Money that would then be spent on goods and services, which would hopefully, and successfully did, jumpstart the economy. It's a type of policy that's espoused by Keynesian economics, which is a British, Keynes, who I forget his first name, was a British economist. But the idea is the government spends money to start the economy up. In theory, if it works, everything works well. If it doesn't work, then that means the government just goes hugely into debt. In this case, it works. Excuse me. Another important point in Mein Kampf is the idea of Lebensraum, which means living space. One of the problems with the Treaty of Versailles, according to Hitler, was that territories taken by other Allied states, such as Alsace-Lorraine, the Sudetenland, the Rhineland, were German, and by taking these states away, they were denying the right of self-determination to Germany. In essence, why does everybody else get self-determination, but we don't? And the truth is, there is truth in that. The Rhineland and Sudetenland were pretty much ethnically German. They didn't necessarily want to be part of these other states. And so, this kind of resonated with the German people, even beyond his anti-Semitic rhetoric. One thing that we often think about Adolf Hitler is that he's this monster who caused the Holocaust. But he was also a man who engineered Germany's immersion out of one of the worst periods in its history and was able to make it a very powerful, respected nation again. In the 1930s, Time magazine put this photograph on their cover as he was declared Man of the Year. So again, we have to understand the story of Hitler isn't as straightforward as maybe we have seen before. It's fairly complicated. And again, interestingly enough, if he hadn't done the whole Jew killing thing, he probably to this day would have been remembered as one of the greatest politicians in the 20th century. That's kind of the interesting thing about it, is this thing that happens, the Holocaust, and I say this thing, really colors the rest of his history. We have to remember that it's a little bit more complex than all that. Not only because, as historians we want to understand, but also applying it to the modern era. Because the thing with the Holocaust is, it's not like Hitler is going around saying we just need to murder all the Jews. It's not like this is one of his campaign promises, and people are like, yeah, that's what we should do. It's something that emerges beyond any one set of borders. It is this beast that is constantly with us. It is really quite easy to cause people to do awful things to each other and really not have to order. Because, you know, again, it's a fairly complex issue. Starting off, 1935, the Nuremberg Laws. This is what your blog is going to be about. You'll be reading some of the Nuremberg Laws and answering some questions about them. Now, the Nuremberg Laws basically go about setting Jews up as second-class citizens. And within their own country, they lose a lot of privileges. Things like not being able to vote, or not being able to marry Germans. You know, so there's all these things that start treating them as second-class citizens. But this is no new story. This has been done numerous times. But then Kristallnacht, which is what the video you guys watched about last week, explained was the beginning of the Holocaust. The night of broken glass, where Jewish homes and businesses and synagogues were destroyed and burned, and Jews taken out of their homes and beaten and murdered. Now note, there was never any point in that video where the SS or the German government said, go out and kill Jews. But it happened. You might recall that scene where there was the one SS officer who was shooting at the guy who got thrown off the bridge against orders. And the guy turns around and says, the SS orders are the most important thing. The guy just kind of shrugs. The Holocaust wasn't only perpetuated by the government, but by their own neighbors. Folks who were, you know, friends, next door neighbors, suddenly turn hostile because of what you've become, a second-class citizen and being a scourge. Remember, the Jews in Hitler's anti-Semitic rhetoric were painted as the great enemy of Germany and indeed the world. They could not be trusted. So this began what was known as the Jewish problem. What do we do with Jews? Option number one, kick them out of the country. The problem is when Germany tried to do this, no other country was willing to take them in. Now, partially that's anti-Semitism from around the world. It also, however, deals with these countries are going through their own Great Depressions. Imagine if we suddenly shipped out 6 million people into another country. How are they going to deal with that? And these aren't people, by the way, who are coming with lots of money and, you know, they're just going to go buy houses and start their careers. Like, these are people who have nothing because they're being stripped of all the worldly goods by the Germans when they're sent out. They can't handle it. They can't handle that many refugees. So they say no. Second solution. If we're going to have them, we got to be able to control them. The best way of controlling them is to deny them the ability to be moving around freely in society. So you concentrate them. First in ghettos, then in concentration camps. Now, let's analyze concentration camps. What's the purpose of the concentration camp? What do we do? Yeah, we want them out of society, we want them over here, and doing what? Well, eventually, yeah, we're going to make it work camps. Try to get labor out of it, free, eventually slave labor. Eventually, though, and this is where the Holocaust turns on its head, we go to murder them. Now consider this. Efficient murder of a group of people. We want to wipe them off of the face of the earth. Kill them all. That's the Holocaust. No other goal. That's what makes it so horrific. We're not talking about killing anger. We're not talking about any emotion at all. It's not that the people are mad at the Jews per se. It's that they are scum to be scrubbed off the planet. They are taking up space we need to get rid of them, and we need to do it efficiently, like a machine, like a factory of death. That's where you hear stories of people being forced to dig a big trench and then are just shot in front of it so the body falls in the hole to be buried over. But even that takes too much effort. So eventually you start throwing them in a furnace alive. Just burning them day and night. That's the truth of the Holocaust. Now I can go on and on about numbers. And I fear that that's what education about the Holocaust has become. It's become a series of numbers. We're going to talk about how many people died, and these sad stories, and watch movies like The Boy in Striped Pajamas and things like that. But that doesn't really teach us anything. It teaches us statistics. What we need to know is why, how. Specifically, what went on to cause this to break out. Because the fact is, this isn't an isolated event. Holocausts are still going around the world today. In 100 years, people will look back at us and see what happened in North Korea and say, why did we not do anything? Why didn't we stop the Holocaust from happening? Just like we do looking back at World War II. Why did the Americans just swarm in there and stop all this murder from happening? Huh? Because we didn't know about it? Well, that's not true. Because we just didn't care? Not really true. We're talking about costs, not just in terms of money, but in human lives. How many people would lose their life if we went to war with North Korea? How many people would lose their life if we went to war with Germany? You know, it's not a simple matter of mathematics, where this is what needs to be done. It's literally the devil's arithmetic. And it's a hard call to make, even in the best of circumstances. Now, in the case of the concentration camps and the final solution, it's going to take a progression of ideology. Because initially, this idea of keeping these folks in camps was no different than what the United States was doing with Japanese in World War II. We were putting them in concentration camps ourselves. We weren't mass murdering them. So that begs the question, how does it happen? And we will answer these questions. So this is what I'm getting to with the Holocaust. We're not going to study the numbers. We're not going to read the sad stories. We're going to look at the psychology and the sociology behind why it happened so that we can start to understand how to keep it from happening. So, finishing up. This is one of the synagogues that was burned out during Christmas. Again, you saw the destruction that occurred, but this is really the turning point. This is when things go from being the standard, typical anti-Semitism to something much different. This shows the New York Times article on it. And again, you have down here, Jews are beaten, furniture and goods flown from homes and shops, 15,000 jailed, 20 suicides. Suicides, much like the guy who was beaten to death and thrown off a bridge. This is what happens in a totalitarian state. You do not matter, the state does. There's actually a term or an expression, a figure of speech, that the nail that sticks out gets hammered down. This map shows the concentration camps. And this, again, I think hits for one of the biggest points about the Holocaust. Look where the most concentration camps are located. It's not Germany. Because you can see the concentration here from 0 all the way to 8. or more. And it's in Poland, Czechoslovakia, going up through the coast. This wasn't just an attempt to get rid of Jews in Germany. This became an extermination campaign in other territories. We are clearing the land from everybody who isn't us. That's what the Holocaust is. So, now that everyone is all depressed and full of this kind of moment, consider this. We can stop things like this happening if we put our minds to it. But we are still learning on how to deal with it. We're still learning on trying to get past a point in our history where such actions is acceptable. You know? And your generation is the one that is going to be fixing a lot of problems. You know? Each generation specifically fixes more problems than it creates. So that's at least a positive thought, if nothing else. So, tomorrow we begin section 1, which is actually the war itself. Don't forget to read the Nuremberg Laws blog, and most importantly, your paper is due next week, so don't forget to do it. Okie dokie, deep breaths, everybody. Yes, please. And hit the lights on the way out. Thank you. Let's see if we can figure out who's thing that says A6. I don't know.
Oh, great. Now I get to watch Jungle Book.
Careful now.